So now we talked about the unbelievable emergence of Israeli democracy against all odds, with people without non-democratic background. When they came and established a state, we are at the state of war. 1948, they write the Proclamation of Independence. They think about establishing a constitution, which they couldn't do it because of religious issues, which we are going to discuss further. And somehow it worked with limitation, with problems. And the problems, we are going to deal with it today. And the problem has to do with the friction between labor and revisionists, between the Jabotinsky movement and the Ben-Gurion socialist movement that really was in control of the issue. In terms of number, most of the issue, which is establishment of the State of Israel, labor, the socialists had, and the Haganah, which is the army before IDF was established, had about, in terms of number, they had about 60,000 soldiers, 60, at the height in May of 1948. Etzel had about 5,000. I'm just giving you proportion. Lehi, which is Lochamei Cherut Israel, or the Stern Gang, as the British would like to call them, had about 500 individuals. So these are the proportions. In terms of political agenda, before we go to the friction here, the revisionists and the labor had a totally different agenda about how to create a state. The revisionists said, no compromise, we need to force the British to establish immediately in 1917 or 1920 a Jewish state. Immediately. The labor were more rational and more pragmatic, and they said, we need to establish fact on the ground and not talk much. Get money, get funds, get support from the British behind the scene, not in a formal way. Get a military training to prepare us to have a state. We're a minority in this country. Jews in 1917 were about 80,000, Arabs were 700,000. We need immigration, we need to keep a low profile. The other side, they were very declarative, very formalistic. We got the Balfour Declaration, we need a state on both sides of the Jordan River. Not only on this side, but in the Hashemite kingdom, what eventually be developed. So this is an agenda between very rational, pragmatic, low-key labor movement and socialist and radical revisionists led by Jabotinsky. Eventually, Jabotinsky died of a heart attack in 1940, and Begin assumed his position as leader of the revisionist party. He is fleeing the Nazi regime, ended up in Siberia. Basically, Stalin put him in a camp, and then he is released during the war, and he comes via Tehran to Tel Aviv and become a leader of the revisionist party, of the revisionist movement. Most of the time he is in hiding. No one knows how he looks like. The British are after him. He was hiding and disguised as a rabbi. And he came out from hiding in 1947, 1948. We are coming to the War of Independence. And the book that the reading that I'm giving you, it happens, this Altalena Affair happens in June of 1948. It's the first ceasefire during the War of Independence. It's very clear by that time that Israel is almost a fact on the ground, except with the notion of Jerusalem And we have a lull in the people are not allowed to, everything is underground in terms of smuggling ammunition to the country. And that's how we explain the coming of Altalena. What strikes you about the story of Altalena?
One of the things I kept thinking about is, how do you blow up all those weapons? They need the weapons. I mean, once they shot up the ship, all those weapons are destroyed, right?
Oh yeah, everything was destroyed. What about
The biggest thing was, why would they blow up other Jews after having been subject to such terrible,
Okay, so let me be more precise in my question. What do you think about Ben Gurion here?
But he was ruthless.
He
Yeah,
was with
yeah.
I think he went far beyond. I mean, I never thought anything poorly of him, but, and I know what his reasoning was, but I mean, multiple times, it says here that Begin was only going to use those weapons to kill Arabs. He wasn't going to kill Jews. I mean, that made me cry when I saw how some of these guys put down their guns and said, I'm not going to kill my fellow Jew.
I have a question. Fine. I mean, this is where the writer, by the way, Hutzprin Tzak is from the labor movement. His grandfather was the first speaker of the Israeli Knesset. Then I'll tell you something else.
You could tell.
Who can explain Ben Gurion? Who I want a favorite, and then we will have a debate. Yeah.
I believe Ben Gurion did not cross Begin and his forces because they had in fact been involved in combat against them. And they had two different separate ideologies. And in a revolution, which Israel was, you can't have two competing ideologies. There's one way. And Ben Gurion numerous times offered the olive branch to Begin. And Begin would only go halfway. And you can't do that.
Very interesting. So what we heard now is what I was taught in high school.
That's what you were taught in high school?
Yeah. Because the books were, of course, written by the labor, but there is a point. There is a point to it. In hindsight, we say, oh, Begin was accommodating, he just wanted to have some ammunition for his fighters in Jerusalem. But how could you tell? How could you tell the unfolding of events? What if he really wanted to be a competing force and with the Irgun to continue to create a semi-independent militia of his own? We have it in all the neighborhood. Look at Lebanon, they have militias. In Egypt, you had the Islamic Brotherhood also in those days, in the 50s. How do we know? In hindsight, everybody is smart, but Ben Gurion was a guy who he didn't trust Begin. Another thing, he wanted to create a state. They call the term mamlachtiyut, statism. Only one leader, me, Ben Gurion, the Minister of Defense. But it was not necessarily against the Likud or the revisionists and the Irgun. He dismantled his own force of Palmach. Palmach, which is the power of the shock troops of the Socialist Party. In September, they dismantled them. The person who was in charge of the military, Galili, who was negotiating with Begin, was dismissed. He dismissed everybody that they belonged to the labor movement and in the military, in the pre-issue military, because he thought they were too much ideologue associated with Mapai, which was the other party in the socialist movement. And that happened in May and June, all the way through September. So this is the background. Ben Gurion wanted to create a new army of professional people who serve in in the British Army in World War II. He wanted all of them to be in position of command. To the present day, when you talk to people who were now they're in their 80s, they have a terrible feeling about Ben Gurion, about dismantling Palmach, the shock troops of the Haganah. And they were big and they fought and they suffered in the War of Independence. You may know 6,000 people died, 1% of the issue. 2,000 of them were from the Palmach. Palmach had 6,000, 33% of Palmach died in the War of
Palmach
Independence.
Museum is a wonderful
Yeah,
place to visit, but the thing I think with Ben Gurion is he called them criminals, he called them thugs, you know,
to
to the Irgun. I mean, he
yeah.
was also
you can tell that he was not,
difficult. Well, he was a politician, he wasn't a kind person.
he was a politician. He was rough and tough,
Tough, yeah,
and he did not have a sense of humor.
no,
No sense of humor whatsoever.
But he did have a sense of history, and he did not want to see Jew against Jew like the fall of the Second Temple. I mean, he and Begin knew that there was
Now,
a danger
yeah,
of self-destruction.
and we will talk about the greatness of Begin here in a few minutes. But I want to say something that I read in a different place, not in these places. Ben Gurion, during the Blitz, was in London. He never went to shelters, but whenever Churchill went in the street after bombardment, he went to see Churchill. He was inspired by the determination of Churchill. In 1940, when the France collapsed, they had the largest navy of France was in Oran, in Algeria. At the time, Churchill approached the Darlan, who was the admiral in charge of the French Navy, and asked him to surrender his ship to Britain, so the Nazis will not catch him. And he didn't do it. So Churchill sent it at the British Armada, and they bombarded and killed all the French soldiers and burned down all this French Navy in Oran. And in that way, he sent a message: we are going to fight, and we will not be hesitant, even because we will not let anyone to be to take advantage of the situation, let alone Hitler. At that moment, across the Atlantic, President Roosevelt watched what Churchill was doing. And when he saw it, he said, we are going to support the British. They are going to fight to the end.
Well,
How does it relate to Ben Gurion? Ben Gurion saw it and said, this is my Oran moment. I'm going to destroy whoever is opposing me, and I will stay. No compromise whatsoever. They will not have a militia and not a hinge of a militia, nothing. We will kill all of them. Horrible story,
yeah.
but that was on his mind. In his memoir, he wrote about it. They didn't mention it here.
Does he ever feel bad about anything he did, ever?
No.
Good question.
How did
I-
he explain the Palmach?
He said we need to create a national army. We cannot have a militia. The Palmach doesn't have a sense of hierarchy, command structure. They are following leaders who are politically oriented, associated with socialist left.
They're like guerrillas, though, more of a guerrilla,
And they are against me.
yeah.
Well,
He
I-
was very much about me.
I think Ben Gurion also looked at history. I mean, for example,
Yes.
my father got bombed in Strait by the French when he was waiting to land in North Africa. For 2 days, the French Air Force were killing Americans who are allegedly our allies. So that's the thing. War is not for people who are faint.
Or what?
War is not for people who are faint of heart. You have to look at what is it that you have to do to win, because Israel's choice was win or die.
So Now Begin. This is Ben Gurion, the rationale of Ben Gurion. And Sprinzak is very favorable to Begin in a way. So now I'm going to share with you a personal story. I don't know if it's true or not.
Okay.
I was wondering all the time, why is so much accommodating and explaining Begin? So Yosef Sprinzak, his grandfather, was on the running to be the Israeli president. And Ben Gurion said, over my dead body. And he did not become an Israeli. I don't know, it
So
has
he
something
doesn't
to
like
do.
him then.
I don't know if it has something to do with the way that the Sprinzak wrote about it. But it was always in my mind because the Sprinzak is a label. And I wonder why he was so adamantly negative about Ben Gurion point of view, because it's not very much explained here. So this is one thing. What do you say about Begin? I mean, Begin here comes out, and I think correctly, as an unbelievable leader.
Yeah, I thought he was really thoughtful and trying to do the right thing without regard to who hated whom. Because Ben Gurion, it said in the reading that Ben Gurion hated all the people that were against him, hated them. And that has to have something to do with his actions in the thing.
Where is the greatness of Begin here? The restraint. We are not, Jews is not God fighting against Jews. He was humiliated, Begin. We are not going to raise. Now, at one point, we are talking southern Tel Aviv. You have been to Israel, you know the area. This is roughly where the American embassy is today. That area is a close proximity. There was the Red House, which is the center of labor, and Palmach, overlooking the sea. All this area, in terms of people who live there, are from Herzl. It's a rundown Shapira neighborhood, and the borderline with Jaffa. All of them are rundown Mizrahi Jews who are members of Irgun, and you can tell that they are ready to fight, to go to the beach and fight. If you remember, there is one brigade, Kiryati Brigade, refused to shoot. The members of the Irgun were about to storm the headquarters of Palmach. They didn't have any fighters. By chance, Rabin came to see his later to be wife, Leah Rabin, and he organized the people. He called people from a few miles away to come immediately to defend. And then Begin said, no, we are not going to fight. He could have sent the boats with ammunition, machine guns, and soldiers. It could have been.
All those weapons were lost, and like you said, he was humiliated because they did it right in front of all those people on the beach in Tel Aviv.
Right.
Why did the author not say what you did, which is that they were most of the Irgun were Mizrahi?
Why he
doesn't say that,
He doesn't say.
but why?
But the Ben Gurion has some, like many, he had some kind of prejudicial view of Mizrahi Jews were Irgun and some Lehi too. My father, who was Haganah, and he had a split view, and he said they were really fighters. I was looking at all of them. They were fighting, and the British were killing them and executing them. After, I'll tell you something. You know the Akko, the photos in Akko, city of Akko. You saw the movie Exodus, I'm sure. So that were the place where they executed the Irgun members.
Yeah, we went to that place.
Now,
to see it.
when Israel was established, in order to diminish the value of that place, it became the center of the largest mental institution in Israel. So people will not come and visit the shrine for the heroes of Irgun.
Hmm.
At the time, my father, who was diehard Ben-Gurionist and labor movement, but he had the view of what is right and wrong. He took me there. He said, you need to know, they were fighters and they were also heroes who fought for the
Rapid
independence
work
and
professor.
executed. And that's why I developed a much more gray and nuanced view of political
So you're not biased.
situation. No, they were fighting.
Well, what about that other group, though?
Lefty,
Yeah.
Lehi,
Lehi,
Stern Gang, they were a very interesting group on its own right. They were split between a very socialist, like communist, and a fascist. Some of them said, we will fight, we will even cooperate with fascist Italy and Nazi Germany.
Yeah, that was like,
I had a hard time with that.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. And I mean, he's writing about it. Eventually, one of them, Shamir, became the prime minister of Israel. He was on the right wing, and he was associated by some account with all kind of assassination. He was a hardcore fighter. If Begin was an ideologue hiding where was it? In closets. He was hiding in closets for 3 years. Shamir was a fighter. He was always out and fighting and never talked. Eventually, he became, before he was member of Mossad.
Did Ben Gurion lose any people in the Holocaust? Ben Gurion,
Of course,
because
he had family.
he did, because I know that.
But his primary family, he brought them, all of them to Yishuv, to the land of Israel before the Holocaust. So parents,
I thought
sisters,
maybe that was part of the reason why.
no cousins,
That Begin was sold,
no, well,
because his parents.
but it's a contentious issue. We are going to talk in a minute when we are going to discuss the other calamity in 1952 about the reparation agreement. What do you think about what Ben Gurion is saying, which I asked you? They use a gun to shoot and blow the Altalena.
A holy gun.
It's a holy gun, it should be in the temple.
I don't like it.
This is an issue, it's a contentious issue. So out the 1950s and the 60s, when you go to rallies of the Likud Herut, they mention this.
So I think it's very hard to judge decisions that were made at that time because they don't have hindsight. They didn't know how it was going to turn out. And clearly Ben-Gurion knew in his mind, maybe he felt anointed, what it's going to take to make a state. So it's hard now, we have the view of seeing what happened. And in fact, it seems like he made the right decision. But it must have been an incredibly difficult decision.
Absolutely.
I thought that the author made it clear that you can't really tell did he make the right decision, that it could have been handled differently and you would have had the same outcome of that kind of damage.
But that's hindsight.
Right.
Feel free to add your point of view. Alan, your thoughts? No,
I'm okay, I'm just listening right now.
no problem. So at least we see the nuances and difficulties in these are hard times.
They're human.
No
Make
one
mistakes,
at the
right?
time knew how the war will end. Nowadays, the literature is saying, when I grew up, the idea was all these Arab countries are ganging up on the small Yishuv. Now, in hindsight, we know that the Yishuv met the military. Israel has in October of 1948, 110,000 soldiers. All the Arab countries together sent to fight Israel, the Israeli state on 65,000. But we didn't know that. Who knew? In hindsight, we know. At the time, we didn't. In terms of losses, Israel suffered most of everybody. We don't know about numbers of Arabs, Palestinian who fought or Arab countries, but the idea that there were not more than 10,000 who died on the Arab side in the war. The Israeli lost 6,000. So that's important in terms of hindsight and at the time of the event, as they were unfolding.
The other piece is that I think Ben Gurion looked not just at Jews, he looked at what happened over just about every country, especially the United States. We had 5 rebellions between 1790 and 1800. There were people who signed the Declaration of Independence who never rebelled against the United States because they thought they knew the better way. And so I think he was someone who was paying attention to human nature.
Now we are still in the war, and there are 2 traumatic events that are taking place. One, the massacre of Bir Yassin in April 9th of 1948, where Irgun and Lehi, in coordination with Haganah, stormed that village and basically massacred between 100 and 120 people. Arabs are saying there were 245. Apparently, it's more close to the 120 that died. Men, women, children. Was a horrible event. Immediately, the Yishuv leadership and the chief rabbis, denounced it. And that was a major event because all the Arabs at the time used it and inflamed numbers and basically said that the Jews also raped women. And that is directly responsible for the fact that within days, all the Arab population of Haifa jumped on boats and fled to Lebanon, close to 15,000. Also, villages around Jerusalem, Arab villages fled.
That was in
48, the April of 48. Within the Arabs in East Jerusalem, there was a convoy of, I'm not sure where I read it, a convoy of I think Shprintzak is mentioning.
The doctors and nurses going to Hadassah.
Yeah.
Sheikh Jarrah, ambushed, and 80 or 90 were killed. 90. Only 30 bodies were retrieved, all of the others were ashes. As a result of that, the president of Hebrew University, Yehuda Magnus, who was a person who believed in cooperation and creating a dual state of Jews and Arabs, left Israel, and he was really forced to retire. And within months, he died of a heart attack in New York. Comments?
What was the thinking behind massacring civilians?
What was happening is they came with a loudspeaker and told all the Arabs to leave, to flee. The loudspeaker did not work properly. So Arabs saw all of a sudden Jews with guns running in the village, and there was exchange of fire. They were armed. And the Haganah, the Irgun and Lehi were ruthless fighters, as they mentioned, and they threw hand grenades into houses. So people will die.
But why were they even there telling these people to leave their homes? Their homes, I mean, why did they even start it? Why did they go there?
What we see in the War of Independence is the road to Jerusalem, all the Arab villages basically sabotaged the convoy of the trucks that brought food throughout from 1947 through the independence. They were attacking Jewish convoys. And at one point, Ben Gurion and the leadership of the Haganah said, we need to destroy all these villages. They don't let us live in peace. We need to get rid of them. So that's what explained. Deir Yassin was at the entrance to Jerusalem. When you go down the hill to Jerusalem, on your right, you see some abandoned houses. That was Deir Yassin. In 1929, they ambushed and attacked the Jewish community of Givat Shaul. Today is a very religious at the entrance to Jerusalem. May explain some of it. Now, the Arabs at the time were about destruction, annihilation of the issue. I mean, the leadership, Hajj Amin al-Husseini, we will talk about it too in the fourth session of our discussion. They were affiliated with Nazi Germany. We now know that during the War of Independence, there were some SS people in the West Bank helping with the creation of sophisticated bombs at the time in 1948. So that explains some of it. Yeah.
Also, wasn't didn't Arab leaders tell the Arab villagers to flee and then come back later with the victorious
That's
Arab
so,
army?
and they said, you leave, we are going to reconquer the land for you. So it's a combination of all of this event that took place.
Did that theory work anywhere? I mean, were there other villages that they went to and told the Arabs to leave and it was peaceful?
Look, I'll tell you something else. Haifa, which was a city that Jews and Arabs lived in harmony, more or less. I mean, mostly it was led by Christian. The Israeli Yishuv, the leadership of the Yishuv, among them the first mayor of Haifa, Abba Hushi, they came to the Arabs and said, don't leave. You had a good time with us, stay in town, don't leave. We have an honest broker, the chief commander of the British Army in Haifa, wrote his memoir, and he said, it's amazing. The Jews are asking them to stay. Why they are not staying? They never fought. There was no blood, bad blood between Jews and Arabs in the city of Haifa. They should have stayed. And they decided to leave. They decided to leave because the leadership of Hajj Amin al-Husseini told them to leave. And the Christian leadership, they had a very tenuous relation with Muslims. I mean, if they will cooperate with the Jew, they will be seen as traitors. They are Christians. So they need to be sometimes more loyal to the leadership in Cairo than to their own interests and the people that they serve in Haifa. And they fled.
So what happened to there was a whole lot of Christians in Israel back then. What happened to them?
Some stayed and some fled. They are quite not a large. In Haifa, you have still Christian. In Jaffa, you have Christian. In Jerusalem, in East, but that's East Jerusalem. Yeah. In Nazareth, you have Christian. You have some villages in the lower Galilee with Christians. The people in Nazareth, for example, stayed in town and they didn't leave. We are talking Muslim and Christian. Decision about what to do with population that is in town was left to local commanders to decide. I mean, of the Israeli military. We know the story of that was written about the Arab community of Lod and Ramle were chased out because they were involved throughout the 1940s in active fighting against the Israeli traffic, and they were involved in all kinds of terror activity against individuals. So the decision about them was to let them all go. But actually not all of them lived. There are Arabs, and today Ramle and Lud are, half of them are inhabited by the Muslims.
What was the goal of the
But
early?
I mean, about Arabs and Jews, we are going to have in 2 weeks a session who is a Jew, and then we will deal with the issue of the relationship between secular and religious in Israel and the problematic nature of the relationship. And then the following week, we are going to deal with the issue of the Arabs in Israel prior to 67. Their relationship, their position in society, and how they were treated in the Israeli democratic state. So I'm just.
How were the Arabs treated by the British?
How? Say it
How were
again.
the Arabs treated by the British?
It's a whole class. It changes over time, all the time. It's complex. The word that is appropriate, complex. In the 1930s, I'm just looking at the watch in capital. In the 1930s, there was an Arab rebellion against the British. They want to sue them off the land and to create an Arab state. And they did not agree to the idea of a division between a Jewish state and an Arab state. So that tells you something.
Was this related with the Arab revolt in Iraq at the time? Was that the same time?
Yeah, in 1941, there is an Arab revolt in Iraq, but I don't want to go there because it diverted our discussion. We will deal with Arabs in the Middle East and in State of Israel in 3 weeks, and so we will have a much more focused discussion.
Ari, what was the proportion between Christian Arabs and Muslim Arabs in Israel at that time?
In Israel in 1948?
Yes.
I need to look at this. I'm not sure. I'll come with a response next week. I don't have all the information in my head. I'm sorry.
You're pretty good.
Aryeh, I just have a question, not for now, but for maybe to think about in the future. How do we talk about the ethical aspects of nation creation? How do we deal? Because people ask us about this, you know, that we were terrorists, and and that's what it took to found our nation. But
we were terrorists. You mean the Yishuv was a terrorist?
no, but in terms of the kind of actions that are taken during war, and how to think about that.
Yeah, I mean, war is war. What can you do? The response is on terrible activities took place on both sides. But more in the Arab side, there were no recounting and they would never apologize for any horrific activity like Deir Yassin. In the Yishuv, I did it when we had a class about the War of Independence in a different session. In 1948, just a minute, in 1948, there was atrocities committed in a village in a southern, near Hebron, in a Hebron village by the IDF, killing of civilians. At the time, Natan Alterman, who is considered to be the spokesperson or the chief poet of Israel up to 1970. He wrote about it, about how you kill a person innocently who walk on the street by Israeli soldier. This poem became a must read by every soldier in the Israeli army. In 1948, and Ben-Gurion, the Prime Minister and Minister of Defense, ordered it to be given to everyone who is fighting in the war. So it gives you a sense from the very beginning there was an idea that we cannot kill civilians. We are different. We kill combatants. And if civilians are dying, we need to acknowledge, apologize, and so on. I'll tell you, I was a soldier in 73 in the Suez Canal. I crossed the Suez Canal to what is at the time was nicknamed Africa, and we came to a village, Egyptian village, and kids were running all over. The mothers were, and we gave them all our food. I didn't eat it that day. All our food we gave to the kids. It's anecdotal, but it tells you something.
I think Sophie had
Please.
starting to ask something.
I wasn't asking, I was just gonna say that regarding the state building, and the idea of kind of state building, that it felt to me very much like the thesis of chapter 1 was about the idea of state building being something really specific that the Labor Party thought about, that they were trying in many ways to legitimize their government. And that seemed to be, for me, one of the main takeaways of the entire first chapter that we read, right, was that it seemed very much like it was an attempt to legitimize them, and that it was, they were willing to fight their fellow Jews if it would impact, if it would allow them to be as kind of legitimate.
I'll move. If this is okay, I'll move further.
Yeah.
Now, we deal with the issue of the horrific story of Dir Yassin, which kept basically what like the Altalena Affair, that was the dark side associated with Irgun for decades. Now we have the assassination of Bernadotte. Comments.
Hindsight, stupid, really a stupid thing to do. But, you know, I'm sitting here today. And it just,
It's a murder.
but it's not just it's the murder, it doesn't get you what you want. If anything, it turns the Western world against you. And that's why, I mean, if you want to just not talk about the ethics, but about the practicality, it seems to me that it wasn't practical to get you the results.
And in a way, now we are full circle with Altalena. when Ben-Gurion said, we cannot afford militias. We cannot afford underground, we cannot afford other group, political group with guns, that we have a different political agenda that will undermine the existence and legitimacy of the state of Israel. And in a way, it really was the case. Yes.
In the case of the killing of Bernadotte, I was thinking of the hanging of the British soldiers. Was that the same group that carried out both of those
what?
activities? The hanging of the British soldiers, that
Hanging
case
the
of the
British-
hanging of the British soldiers.
what hanging?
There was a case, I can't remember whether they were doing it, the Stern group. There was
The
this,
bombing of the.
no, where they hung some, they captured some British soldiers, and they hanged them.
I cannot follow you. Can you take?
Oh.
You're not allowed to.
Oh, okay. I read that there was a case that it was either the Irgun or Stern group, I'm not sure, that captured some British soldiers at one point and hanged them.
But they did both of them, the Irgun
Okay,
and both of them did
okay.
hanging. Right,
But that was for,
before
1948.
something, before 48.
Mhm.
Before 48. And well, yeah, but here is the issue of assassination of a diplomat.
Mhm.
And we had a similar story before when the Lehi, were assassinated, the emissary of the Britain to the Middle East in Cairo, Lord Moyne. And that's where Ben-Gurion is coming. He looked at this activity and he said, we cannot afford this stuff. We need to punish them with a strong hand. But what happened here, they really did not. They didn't trace the killer of Bernadotte. Eventually, they knew who it was. He became, in later state of affairs, he became the bodyguard of Ben-Gurion.
Very good.
Agranat, who was in charge of the commission, in his later life, he said that was a mistake with it. We didn't push to do a real investigation and find the killer. That was our first role as an investigative committee of the court. And we didn't do it because we covered up for the government. We gave them all kind of excuses. Why the police didn't investigate properly? Why they didn't find the bullets? Why they didn't do
And that doesn't go along with the ruthless behavior of Ben-Gurion.
well, it goes with cover up with the fact that the judiciary in the first stages of the state said that its obligation is to serve the state rather than be an independent judiciary. Well, we are going to deal with it too. We will discuss it next week.
Where is the reading coming from for who is a Jew? Is it from a book too, or that you're gonna?
Okay, I need to develop.
Need to develop it. Okay. Okay.
I want, the readings that I will bring are intriguing and the best that I can find, and we force everybody to read and engage in it, the same that I found with this
This
one.
was standard.
Yeah, the other will be too, it will scare the daylight out of you. Well, what can I do? I mean, I'm
Good.
bringing you the good.
Ari, isn't Ben Gavir trying to do the same thing with creating a separate force from the IDF now?
We'll talk about it.
Okay.
I did these classes before, but now in view of the undermining of civil society in Israel, I'm developing as I walk. And we have 20 minutes.
Yes.
Now, we are moving 1952, the reparation.
Oh,
Unbelievable story. It's first attack on the Knesset, and it's a different begging. Reparation, yes or no? What do you say?
Well, they didn't want that because it was shameful to take money. And he made all kinds of allusions to other things to make.
I'm
people
asking
think
you
different.
before we go to Begin, what do you think? You are the
Afraid.
Israeli government. What do you think?
I
Would
think it's important. I think it's important, it was important to make sure that Germany admitted that they were wrong and all this business about not talking to Germany because of what they did, I'm not sure that's such a good thing. And I know it's not a good thing to say you and your children's children should hate Germany.
Important, yes.
Again, with hindsight, I think what we read about the fact that the country was close to being broke and they were expecting this huge influx of refugees from Europe. And how are they going to do this? I mean, they needed the money
Oh, yes.
desperately, and as much money, I mean, I remember my parents always talking about, we don't get luxuries while Israel needs money.
Really, that's important.
But we're talking about such astronomical sums that I don't think the American Jews were coming up with that kind of money for
They did.
Israel.
Had it not been for the American Jews' contribution in 1948, Israel would have never been able to have ammunition. They raised about $100 million in 48 here in the US, astronomical figure. Most of it went to buy armament from the Czechoslovakia.
Right, yeah.
I mean, we are talking guns, I'm talking
Phones.
airplanes.
Well, I remember when Miriam Tabachnik went to get her reparation money, so, I mean, she felt like she needed to do that, and so if you look at it from her point of view, she felt that was good. I went along with her, the way she
Yeah.
felt about it.
I remember growing up in Israel in the early 50s. We didn't have enough milk. I was scraping the wall and to eat it. And that was 1955. We were really
The thing
hungry.
about reparations too, I think it kind of fits in with Judaism in terms of making amends. And it built a bridge to the Germans. So the reparations from World War I were designed to punish. The reparations to Israel were designed to make good on losses.
Home.
To atone, and it allowed the Germans to become, for lack of a better word, become clean. It was their trip. It was their trip to the.
Yeah, it was very important at the time, absolutely. With the reparation, the economy in Israel basically started to function. The infrastructure, the power grid in Israel, machinery, factories, all of them came with the support of that German money and reparation, which my mother got. And basically our life changed. Transformed.
We'll
What
talk
would have
about,
happened if there were, would the Israelis have voted for it? At the time,
Well, at the
or
time,
it turned into a good thing when there were so many people against it?
well, that's
Generally, what
we
was
are.
the population? Do you think it would have won if there were the democracy that had a vote of?
But it did it as well. You can see the difference between Labour Prime Minister, who knew he need to establish a state, the state need to absorb all this huge number of immigrants and to create an economy and maintain an army. He was very pragmatic on this system.
But did
And
people give your
Begin-
mother a hard time about it?
What?
Did people give your mother a hard time about it?
Look, in the early 50s, a horrible situation about people who survived the Holocaust. Maybe I'll do a class on this one.
So that.
They
nobody-
call me soap. Soap. The Nazis make,
Oh,
So, out of people, yeah.
so people who survived the Holocaust are soap. Like,
Right.
My parents,
it can be horrible, horrible. Just a second. Everybody, people who survived the Holocaust were considered to be either flake, lawless, mean, because they survived. The good people died. How come they survived at the expense of the others? Things changed dramatically with the Eichmann Prize.
Yeah.
Then people realized what was the horror of the Holocaust. No one believed what happened in the Holocaust when beforehand. It's, oh, you're exaggerating. Oh, it cannot happen like that. Ah,
Jews said that.
of course,
Yeah.
Jews.
Why didn't they learn from the
But
Nuremberg?
Boris was
One
trying
more
to ask
thing,
something.
one more thing.
Yeah.
When you are looking at the Israeli textbooks, Israel was all about macho at the time, machoism. They cannot talk about the Holocaust, destruction of life, but rather they talk about Shoah Ugvura. Shoah Ugvura, Holocaust and fighting. And they reconnected into the few uprising in the Warsaw Ghetto, Kovno Ghetto, and other places that are very tiny and minuscule. The issue of courage is survival. How you are in hell and you manage to come out alive. No one talked about that. And it came out during the Eichmann Affair, which was broadcasted all day long for 4 months. And that was a transformative moment in Israeli collective history.
Wait. Oh, Morris has been waiting.
no,
Please.
Morris, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
no, I just wanted to say that, my parents both received reparations from Germany. And I had, some mixed feelings about it, but then, the more that I learned about what Germany did, to the Jews, and I mean, basically, like they took their gold fillings out of their teeth. It wasn't just, taking whatever they had from their houses, which they did, confiscate their property. But they were ruthless. And I think the whole idea of reparations was important for healing on both sides. The Germans had to admit to the fact of what they did, and the German people had to understand that they participated in it, and they had to own up to that. And the Jews had to be able to take that money and be able to forgive so they could move on in their life. So I think it was important.
Morris, I don't think that the Jews who took the money had to forgive.
They didn't have to.
No, and I
Well-
don't think that they did. I think if they took the money, it was a good thing that they did. My father didn't want the money, which I thought was really stupid. But I think later on he felt stupid for not doing it because he could have used it.
Yeah, I want to make a point about forgiveness. In Judaism, we don't have the Christian concept of forgiveness. We have the concept of justice. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not, but here I think it's good. And in Hebrew, they use a very peculiar term for reparation. In Hebrew, it's nakam v'shilem, shilumim, which mean revenge and payment for atrocities. There is no mention of the term forgiveness. And Ben Gurion, who coined the term, was adamant about that. Shilumim, it's for wrongdoing, you are paid. There is no element of forgiveness. Please.
You mentioned the Eichmann trial. What about the Nuremberg trial? Didn't they learn a lot from the Nuremberg trials about that?
No,
No?
They didn't
Uh,
see them.
Well, I mean.
They weren't televised.
Well, look, it's a totally adjacent topic. Maybe I'll do it.
Mhm.
But I will give you the book to read. There is The Seventh Million by Tom Segev. I'll bring
Oh.
it the next time and
Oh.
you will.
I only-
You read it?
I haven't read it yet. I read some of it. I own the book.
It came in translation, so it's important book to read. Now we are coming to the debate in the Knesset and in the street of Jerusalem. I'm not sure if you have been to the old Knesset in Jerusalem before the fancy one that is today, the 1960. The old Knesset was in downtown Jerusalem, totally unprotected. It's nowadays just, I'm not sure what it is, an abandoned building, but it was really in the middle of the street. And it all glasses around it. So it's basically a place that you can easily attack. So we are coming to the Knesset, and in 1952, Begin is elected to the Knesset, and he's basically giving his speech of what is it? Is low oath of office as a member of the Knesset. He lost in the election half of his power. I mean, he has only 8 members of Herut, and he's quite on the verge. He suffered from depression all his life. Yes. And he was talking about basically quitting political life and becoming a plain lawyer. And then the story of the reparation came, and it brought everything back to life. A member of his party, Bader, who was a really close associate, said, "How can you quit now? Think about your dead mother." And that brought Begin to life. And he fought. And he went to the street, and what does he say in the street? And this is the part of what I asked you to read. And I gave you this citation. Today I'm going to say,
War for life and death.
it's a war for life and death. In the opposition paper, they said, today I'm going to say blood, spill their blood. And in the translation that we have, he said yes. Today I say yes, attack the Knesset. Attack whatever it happened. There were 15,000 people near Kikar Tzion. Kikar Tzion is the Midrachov, the one that you buy all it's a very touristic site now that goes from Jaffa Street all the way up. Traffic is not allowed to go there. You have all kinds of eateries and cuisine and knickknacks of clothing. And they are walking up the street, 15,000 people. You have 500 policemen standing, not more. And they attack the Knesset. And you have the speech that he gave in the Knesset too. Comments. You read it, I mean.
But did that just bring up more contention between Ben Gurion and Begin again?
But what do you think about the behavior of Begin here? I mean, we saw Begin as almost an angelic, responsible character in Altalena. Where is he here?
I think it sounds like he's operating out of what I would call a knee-jerk emotional reaction, as opposed to thinking about, even in Jewish law, monetary compensation for being a victim is a common thing in Jewish law, monetary compensation. And so and who was more victimized than the Jewish people here? And so the fact that the Germans owed the Jews for the offense, as Janet said, I would say it's not to forgive. It's like the Jewish people were owed that and more. for what they had to endure. And so I read his speech and I thought, are you letting your emotions just get away with you and like not seeing the forest for the trees, basically?
Yeah.
That's how.
You can see the other face of Begin here. The irresponsible, emotion, fanatic. And basically he says, well, they are using gas that your children, that your grandparents were gassed by the Nazis in Auschwitz and Majdanek. And this is the hysterical propagandistic, inflammatory Begin that comes out to be later.
How old is he at this point?
34, 35. He's young.
He's still young.
He's young. Oh, maybe 40.
Old
I
enough.
think at this
Oh, well,
point,
He should have known
Yeah,
better.
yeah.
at this point, Bacon was, there's a Yiddish word, verbissen. He was embittered.
Yeah.
Yeah, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Verbissen it is. But that's, by the way, the inflammatory. Well, that was the way that he spoke. And as a result of this, the idea that Begin is a fascist got credibility in the public debate and in political arena in Israel in 1950s and 60s. That was the sign of that followed him throughout up to the late 1960s. That Begin is irresponsible, inflammatory, and almost fascist. And then you have attack on the Knesset. They threw stones at the Knesset. Thank goodness no one was killed. The police was restraining and they didn't shoot. And that, thank goodness for that. But people were hurt, and the chief of police was Ben Gurion's son.
Oh,
And he
Nothing
was
like nepotism.
yeah, well, nepotism is the name of the game. And his wife, Paula Ben Gurion, she was a nurse here in the US. So she was tending to people, member of the Knesset, who was hit with stones and with broken glass. And had problem because the fumes from the gas came inside. It was really terrible situation. However, they managed to recover. Begin left the Knesset, and they had a vote, and they voted. In spite of everything, they had a vote. It's like what happened here in the different circumstances. With January 6th, they managed to proceed with the proper protocol, and the vote for approve the reparation was 61 to 50. It was very contentious. At the time, Begin said that there were 5 Arab members in the Knesset who were were voting with the Mapai, with the Labour. That you shouldn't vote. It's all about Jewish issues. So, but
nothing like being inclusive.
But these are the circumstances that are around us.
And I apologize because I didn't get to read that section. But were the Germans giving reparations to Jews outside of Israel at this
Oh,
point?
yes.
Oh, yeah.
So they were, but they weren't
It-
giving it to
It's
Jews
very
in Israel.
interesting that they made private arrangement with people from Germany who asked for reparation, and they had the documentation 1949, 1950 at the time. The Cherut, I mean, the revisionist Begin and they were supportive of this. And then things evolved in a different way. It became a major controversial issue and uproar, and he realized that this is a political bonanza for him, perhaps. It's conflicted. Why you supported a limited amount at the beginning? Comes out that at the end, the reparation were enormous amount. We are talking $750 million. Huge number in 1952. most of it went for a state institution, which was supported by the Histadrut, by the labor movement. So the benefits went to really government activities like infrastructure, like construction. Most of it were managed by labor. And Begin said, well, they will get all the monies. But he was against it on principle. They are the killers, they shouldn't. And if we get money from them, we are really passively recognizing the government, and we should never have any relationship. You read the record, they are all Nazis. Adenauer is Nazi, his helpers are Nazis, let alone. Or everybody in Germany, their children are Nazis, their grandchildren, I mean, it goes berserk.
Well, that means Begin would have liked to have had the kind of horrible suppression of Germany that happened after Versailles, where Germany was punished, humbled, but it just set the stage for another war. These reparations set the stage for a peace.
But at the time, the government and the Zionist Congress led by Nahum Goldman, they were behind it. They were in Kabul with the reparations. The idea was we need to do it now because Germany need to get some kind of legitimacy in the world. Germany wants to be a member of the NATO alliance. And we, by doing this activity, we in a way will give them some kind of legitimacy to join NATO and become a legitimate member of the Western Alliance. And we can pressure them at that point now. And in a way, Adenauer acknowledged it as well. So they work together in behind the scene to do this. And thank goodness that Ben-Gurion was able to do it. Later years, Begin reluctantly acknowledged the significance and the importance of getting reparation in the late 1970s, when he had a formal reception as a prime minister to the German ambassador to Israel.
In 1985, I was on deployment to Germany. At that time, the Russians still.
It got divided.
And I was about 4 clicks from the Russian border. And I was on a team, 5 Germans, and 5 German reservists, 5 US reservists. And we were going on maneuver damage control missions, in terms of when people would roll their tanks, the tanks through so much far to destroy it. We were doing all things, but there's a lot of time in the office to talk. And it was very interesting talking with the German reservists because they were so incredibly anti-Nazi and so incredibly pro-Israel. And he was, and I think the reparations, as I said before, I think that's a pathway. When you have just reparations, not like World War I, which were punishment, but just reparations for bad acts, that opens a chance for forgiveness, or at least a chance for the bad acts people to give penance.
Yeah, I was going to say, had there not been reparations, I would imagine that what we saw in our recent trip would not have been. That, there you wouldn't have seen any recognition of what the Nazis did. You wouldn't have seen the monuments, you wouldn't have seen the plaques, you wouldn't have seen even talking to people, you wouldn't have had the same, you wouldn't have heard from the people the same kinds of things if there wasn't that state recognition then.
On this one, I watch from time to time Deutsche Welle. It's the German broadcast. It's like public television, no commercial. They are forcing the foreign workers who are getting pension from German, Turkish, whose husband died, and they are getting pension from the German government to undergo sensitivity training about Holocaust. To know about respect for the other and about the Holocaust.
Well, the other thing is, I mean,
Very
that,
interesting.
unlike any other Axis country, they really did teach about the Holocaust. And there were kids of a certain age after high school who went to Israel to work on kibbutz. I mean, this was part of their education. And it's a good thing.
Absolutely. Go on. Well, we can talk more and more, but we will continue in 2 weeks on the major issue, who is a Jew? And I will prepare some, you are people who are reading, so I'm not constrained by reading. You will read. And we will welcome it.
And it might be nice to have a reading list that I didn't copy the notes, the footnotes, but the way that you were suggesting.
Right,
But there,
yeah, yeah.
maybe if you came up with a book of people who are interested for additional reading, that would be helpful. Just a thought.
Sure. But as you notice, I evolve as classes are moving, I adapt to the, yeah, to the volume.
Thank
To
you
the
very
influence.
much.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What's good?
Thank you, I.
Thank you. All right, thanks, everyone.
The best. And you can bring more people to the class.
Okay.
It's always good.
Ori, thanks for joining us today.